If you or someone you know has a story, encounter, or experience you would like to share with my viewers, please send it to my email at stories@whatlurksbeneath.com. Thank you. I was elk hunting with my brother in southeastern part of Missouri, around and in the Mark Twain National Forest. My brother and I have been hunting for years and years together. My mom had us close together, only 2 years apart. We know what animals look like and sound like, and I swear this wasn't a bear or an elk. We were trudging through the woods when we came across a smaller creek. My brother stopped me in mid-step and hit my arm. "You see that shape over there?" I had to squint to see what he was talking about, but when I saw it, I freaked. Out, about 20 or so more yards away from the creek, just beyond the continuation of the woods, was this big, black shape. We were probably about 50 yards away from the creek, if I had to guess. I want you to understand something. This shape was low to the ground, like it was crouched down on all fours or something. It was truly weird, and it was so black. I couldn't make out exactly what animal it was. We had a relative view of its shape, and it didn't resemble no bear or bull at all. It looked like it had ears, but its body was wrong, like it was disproportionate. It was perfectly still, never moved a muscle. I couldn't tell if it was looking in our direction or what it was doing. We never saw it move at all. I started going back the way we came, trying to get my brother to come with. My brother had a terrible feeling about it, he later told me. Told me the woods had started to get real quiet just a minute before we got near the area we were in. I honestly don't know what to think. Thought you'd like to hear my encounter anyway, with whatever animal it was. I need to give you some details first so the full story makes sense. I met the love of my life 4 years ago when I started dating my now current wife from Instagram. We met, hit it off, one thing led to another, and now we're married. I lived in Colorado Springs at the time, and my now wife lived in Livingston, Tennessee at the time. She actually lived a bit north of Livingston, to be exact. I had made a trip out to see her in June and planned a 5-day trip. I wanted her to show me much of the surrounding area and look for great sights to see and places to hike. I had never been to Tennessee, so it was a wonderful first experience for me. Besides this experience, well, this is more like my girlfriend's experience than my own. This happened in June of 2016. I can't remember the day we were driving around, but I was driving her Kia Soul around up north. We were exploring several areas. My wife wanted to take me to the Willow Grove recreational area, just off of Dale Hollow Lake. Let me remind you that this was about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. The sun was bright. Weather was crystal clear. There was nothing prohibiting visibility at all. I remember it clearly. We were driving on Willow Grove Highway, aka Highway 294. It's packed with beautiful countryside and thick trees all around you. I loved it. There's a lot of ridges and hilled pastures in the area that go just beyond. There was a segment of the road we were off to our right. The passenger side had a larger ridge that went up. It was partially pasture. The ridge at least was, and beyond it was woodline. My wife was in the passenger and I was driving. My wife is looking out the window when I hear her gasp and then start screaming. She became frenzied and hysterical. She demanded I pull over and had worked herself up so much that she vomited. I was freaking out, wanting to know what was going on. I finally had gotten her calmed down enough that she was able to tell me what she saw. Bursting out of the woodline, heading up the ridge was parallel to the road, was a doe, followed by this ugly wolf creature that was bigger than Conan the Barbarian. It was towering over this doe, so it had to have easily been double the size of me. She said it had Dober Pinscherman-like ears, a huge snout, and was blacker than the blackest of black she had ever seen. It chased the doe so fast into the woods, up the ridge, she was just in total shock at what she saw. I didn't know what to believe when she first told me that, trying to comfort her, I informed her that she just must have been seeing things. She really insists that this is what she saw, and had a few seconds of enough time to look at it, and she's not going to forget it. I guess her dad has had problems with those things on a ranch he worked on, just a little more north than where we were. This was years ago that he told her about that, but he told her, in a non-joking tone, that werewolves were running amok and killing cattle. My girlfriend at the time, thinking her dad would always be joking and not serious always, just took it lightly. Her father is a very stoic man. If you met him, he has one emotion: neutral, all the time. My wife isn't the type to make this stuff up either. I've also never seen her so visibly shaken before in my life. She really must have seen what she did. I tried to do a bit of research, but all I could ever find is something called Dogman, which I have no idea if that has anything to do with what she saw. I mean, it kind of matches the description, so that's why I reached out to you. I know nothing of creatures and things that are supposed to exist and aren't. Maybe you can tell me what she really saw. She doesn't really like to talk about it to this day. In fact, sometimes when I try and pry information about it, she just gets quiet. I mean, can you blame her? My doctor that I see once a month moved his office that was about 45 minutes away to 4 hours away. I've been fighting opioid addiction for about 15 years now. The doctor prescribes me a medicine that takes away the need for opiates. Basically, I just traded an illegal addiction for a legal one. But that's neither here nor there. On with the story. About 2 hours into the trip, and none of the signs were on my route. The GPS my father had given me was basically flipping me off, and my cell had about 12% battery left. I was supposed to be on Senni Stretch in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, on my way to a nearby town. Finally, I came across a little building that had only one car in the back. It turned out to be a little mom and pop store. I had to laugh because its name was literally store. I should probably mention that this happened in January of 2018. For those unfamiliar with Michigan winter weather, our snow is measured in feet, not inches, and it rarely gets above 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The store was framed on both sides and backed by miles and miles of pine and birch trees. I got out of my car and went inside. It was your typical roadside, out-of-the-way store. 7 sections of the cooler held beer. One section had soda, juice, milk, a carton of eggs, and a package of bologna. Behind the counter stood a man around 88 to 90 years old, wearing a stained pair of overalls and a reddish-black flannel shirt. 11%. "Sir, can you tell me how to get to Market from here?" I asked. "Well, you're on the US 2 near Indian Lake," he replied. "Keep going west about 20 miles or so, until you see 41 North. Take that for about 90 minutes and you'll hit Market." I thanked him and headed back to my car. I'm just about to climb in when I hear sounds coming from the woods. It was about dinner time and starting to get dark. I looked in the car for a flashlight. None. Suddenly, the light bulb in my brain popped. I went to Google's store and downloaded a night vision app. 99.9? I thought. What the hell? Oh well, it'll be worth it if I can get some pictures. 10%. I stood for a minute to acclimate my eyes to the darkness, then began to creep forward very slowly. I turned my new app on and began to scan through the trees. But the closer I got, the more I thought, these aren't people. I heard breathing, heavy breathing, very heavy breathing. Their sounds were guttural, so primal. Something suddenly crashed into my mind that made my stomach spasm out of control. I have absolutely no protection from whatever this is. A trillion things ran through my brain. Then I figured that I'm almost 50. I've had a pretty great and interesting run. I just hope I can send the pics before I get eaten or disemboweled or whatever it is they might do to me. I snuck into the forest about 30 yards when this form began to take shape. This app was amazing. It was like it was daytime. I crouched down and crept in like a sniper. Soundless. I zoomed in with my new app to its maximum. What I saw stunned me and made my adrenaline rush rapidly through my system. I'm guessing about 20 or so yards in front of me were two animal, human, I'm gonna say hybrids. There was one on all fours. The female, I'd say she was about 6 feet tall and weighed about 200 pounds. She had an amazing coat, bluish silver. The fur was long and shaggy. Human breasts hung downward. Her back arched. A look of carnal pleasure was etched on her perfectly blended wolf-human face. Tiny jet black snout and a mouth full of dagger-like teeth. Her back legs resembled a wolf's, but her front ones were human, except for the fur and long claws. 8%. The male stood directly behind her, 7.5 feet tall, and quite possibly 450 pounds, maybe more. Blacker than black fur, just as long and shaggy as the female's. His features were more wolf-like than hers. Thickly muscled. I mean, if the Hulk was a wolf, this would be him. Rear and front legs were like a wolf's, except for his front paws, which resembled a human's and were clamped onto her haunches. They were, to put it delicately, mating. I was in awe. This was the most beautiful image I had ever seen. At first, they were acting playful. He would gently nibble along her back. It was clear that their love was pure and whole. After a few minutes of that, it became drastically more intense. He bit down hard on her right shoulder, causing her to howl with pleasure. He released the bite, all the while steadily increasing his rhythm. I took about 50 pictures, but only sent one to my email. To this day, I don't know why I only sent one. 7%. After what seemed like an eternity, it was evident that the male was about to conclude his business. I closed my eyes as he raised his head to the sky. The sounds that came out of his mouth were as loud as a rock concert. I thought my ears were damaged. When I opened my eyes, the two creatures were lying there. Then, after a few moments, they got up and started feeding on what looked like a deer, their teeth shredding the carcass as blood covered their faces. I took a few more pics of this new carnage. The pair concluded their meal and began to walk deeper into the forest. 6%. I had felt that I had better get while the getting is good. I slowly turned around and began to inch my way back to the car. Then suddenly, my knee landed on a twig and it sounded like a gunshot. My head whipped around, hoping the beasts were far away enough to ignore it. They weren't. All of our eyes met. I felt the color drain from my face when I noticed they were smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile either. It was a "you look tasty" smile. I started to run to my car, which seemed to me like it was 1,000 miles away. My entire being was demanding I look back to see where they were, but I managed to fight off that urge. My heart was beating so hard it was all I could hear. About 15 feet from my car, I grabbed my keys. In one movement, I opened the passenger side door, jumped in and slammed the door shut. I turned my head to look outside and there was nothing. Nothing but trees and darkness. Did I imagine seeing them? Did someone slip me something without me knowing? Impossible. Then it happened. A soft bump came from outside. It sounded like something was rapping lightly against the car. I put my phone in selfie mode and pointed it outside and downward. I found out where they went to. They were sniffing all along the bottom of the cars and tires. My entire being was screaming to get out and leave now, but my body was frozen. For some reason, I thought if I remained perfectly still, they wouldn't see me. Completely idiotic. All of a sudden, two faces appeared in the window. They were still smiling at me. The male took his claw and tapped the window near the passenger lock, as if to say I had forgot to lock the doors. 4%. Now, on my side, there was tapping coming from my side. I peek over on my peripheral. I could see the female. She wasn't smiling. She looked downright pissed. I looked back to the passenger side. The male had vanished. My eyes quickly jolt back to the driver's side window, also empty. Maybe they became tired of me and went back to finishing the scraps of deer they had left. After a few tries, my hand shaking to put the key in the ignition, I'm just about to turn the key when a giant slam came from the roof. A moment later, a second slam in the roof. There's so much weight on it, it begins to cave in. This is what a mouse feels like just before the car rips it to shreds. I just know they're going to rip through the roof, pluck me out of the seat, and save me for breakfast. 3%. All of their movement stops. I'm just beginning to breathe again when they both howl so loudly, my windshield cracks. Nope, I'm gone. I start the car and floor it and getting the hell out of there. I drove at top speed all the way back home. I figured I'll call my doctor in the morning. I stopped at a gas station when I get back to town. I sat there, shaking, stammering, trying to wrap my mind around what just happened to me. I want to see a cryptid, I said. It'll be fun, I said. 2%. I cracked my window just enough to slide my phone out to take a pic of the roof, silently praying that they were gone. I snapped a pic and looked. Nothing was there, except for dozens of punctures made by their claws. I was 16 when this happened to me. I couldn't tell you the exact time of year, but it was definitely still cold and rainy outside, but not quite winter temps. I had hung out at my friend's house earlier in the afternoon this time, smoking cigarettes and playing Xbox. I came home, had a good dinner, and started getting tired about 8 or so I thought I would just wind down and play Xbox by myself. At the time, my mom was working evenings and nights, and my dad was out of the picture. It was just me all alone. I think it was closer to maybe 9:30 when my room was roasting me alive, so I needed to open my window curtain to open my window. It was cold out this evening, and I had my heater going in my room. Well, my room isn't too big, so it gets really hot just after a little while. I was too sucked into my game to turn it off, so I just ended up getting excruciatingly overheated. I paused my game, get up to open my curtain, and when I pull back the curtain, I fell back screaming at the horror that lied beyond my window. Standing just outside my window, looking right at me, was a demon. It resembles a bat face mixed with a wolf. It was an ugly mother trucker. Red eyes with such an intensity, I felt my heart was going to stop. It never bared its teeth at me directly, but it gave me this huge grin. The most evil Grinch stole Christmas grin. I blacked out after a while of pure fear. It probably wasn't a while, it was probably only a few seconds. But I must have fallen on the floor after that, because when I came to, it was only 10 minutes later, and the thing was gone. I ran in my kitchen, grabbed the biggest butcher knife I could find, and hid away in my room with it next to me. My window for as sure as hell was never getting opened again, and my curtain stayed shut. I even contemplated getting nails and nailing my curtain. I lived in these duplexes at the time with my mother, with me having the very back room. There were several of these duplexes next to each other, with the back just being land with trees they'd never cut down that went on and on. So you could look out my bedroom window and have a great view of the land that goes back a little bit, and then just more and more woods. I have no idea if that's where it came from, but nothing is back there, except maybe raccoons sometimes. Never saw the thing again, and it never made any sounds. My granddad and I saw one of these huge black wolves I've seen talked about. I was 12 at the time and doing some work on my grandfather's garden. He had purchased a rather large home from an auction that he was restoring. The property was large and open, with part of the back property lowering down on a rise and then dropping off about 12 feet into more sloping woods. The back was where he had a massive garden, a shed, and was working on adding in pathways to enhance the experience. He had been having some issues with people trespassing on his property. Mostly homeless people looking to camp out or to break in and stay. He had owned this property for less than a month and was trying to fix it up. I remember I was moving a wheelbarrow to the garden full of soil at the time when my granddad's attention was suddenly pulled beyond the rise by some massive rustling in the bushes. My granddad signaled for me to grab his rifle. He usually kept it by the back door. He was certain it was another homeless person trying to break into his house. I ran back with the .22 rifle and I'm standing right there next to him as he goes over to the rise and aims it down towards the bush, shouting, "Show yourself!" The bush is shaking and thrashing around. Both my grandfather and I start shouting, "We see you down there!" As soon as we finish our sentence, the bush goes still. My grandfather keeps his rifle pointed at the bush and says out loud that he's going to count to 3, and then fire. The person needs to come out now. He counted 1, 2, 3, and fires a round into the ground, probably about 5 feet away from the bush. Out of nowhere, the largest black wolf I've ever seen springs up out from behind the bush and darts off into the woods on all fours, faster than I could ever imagine. My grandfather and I looked at each other with astonishment of what we had just seen. Him and I had never seen an animal so large in our lives. I worked late nights at a bar in Suffolk, Virginia, where I would have to drive home late at night. It was where I would have to drive south on the 642 to drive home. One night it was super late, and I was driving home from work. I was maybe only 20 minutes away from my house at this point, and I got this terrible sensation come over me. I have no other way to describe the feeling other than sheer doom itself. I slowed the car way down, thinking something was going to happen. I wasn't sure what else to do. I see this deer come trotting out of the woods to my right across the road, and then gone. She was going oddly fast, but before I could finish that thought, out stepped this giant hairy thing jumping across the road after the deer. It was huge. It had a very strange build to it. Its front arms were longer than its back, and its back arched. It reminded me a lot of how a hyena's back arches when it runs. This was a big animal, and had a strange-looking face, shorter snout and pointed ears. I did not see a tail at all. My car was completely stopped at this point, and there were no other drivers on the road at the time. I just sat there for a minute, kind of in shock at what I had seen, deciding on whether it was safe to continue my drive or if there were more of them waiting to burst out of the woods. I can't really describe to you what it is I saw. I honestly don't know. This wasn't a bear and it wasn't a dog. It was as big as a horse though. That's what's terrifying. But it wasn't no horse either. I've never in my life heard of an animal quite like this. I've also never seen an animal that large with a back like that. This thing was so black. I don't really come out and tell people about what I saw because I don't want to get laughed at or made fun of. I stand by 100% what I saw that night as truth, and no, it wasn't something that most people don't normally see around these parts.